Hello, it's Chris of Alien Rabbit. I thought I'd do a video talking about process in game design, how I approach process in game design. It's a nice day, it's very nice. The sun's out, getting some fresh air. Just been for a coffee, had some breakfast and that. So I thought how I approach game design myself as a game designer and developer, or whatever. I don't really like defining myself, what's the point? Anyway, carry on. So I tend to, the way I approach, sort of like a method game designer, if that makes sense. So I don't become a character in my game, obviously that would be ridiculous, but I mentally explore what it would be like to be characters in the game, in any game I design, basically. So, for example, when I designed White Knights, obviously like I had to explore a lot of existing literature, film, media about vampires, because it's a game about vampires. The game I'm currently working on now, City of the Damned, London is a good location to do research on that, as well as any urban environment, because cities have a different way of working to smaller, like villages or towns, etc. I don't know, there's much more than cities and villages. You've got a city, anyway. So city tends to be more. Cities tend to be based around the cultural sort of assumptions in the city are that you have to come here and just work basically on, and if you don't, so they tend to be more ruthless, right? So a city in general is a more ruthless environment. It's anyone who's ever been on a metro or public transport in a city knows exactly what I mean. Because the other day, for example, I jumped on the tube as a homeless guy, gave him money, but most people just ignore homeless people basically, because I don't know, most people essentially are selfish, pretty much. We've all got a bit of selfishness inside us. We're all driven by the ego. That's essentially that's what drives us forward, really, as individuals, of course, by definition. So, anyway, where am I going with this? So, also I'm working on this game of City of the Damned at the minute. Walk around urban environments. This is quite a nice urban environment I'm actually at the minute, because it's a marina, it's near the sea. But I've been walking around at night in the like more deprived areas of London, just purely as research, pretty much. You can't really write a story unless you have experienced to some degree the actual reality of what it must be like living in that environment, as it were. I also did this a lot in, like I've had a bit of time out recently up in Scotland, which is like, just to actually like sketch out a lot of the story, but I get to a certain point and then I actually need to be in the actual environment or similar enough environment to the story that's taking place in the game that I'm making. So for example, in the game I'm working on now, it's set in a fictional city called New Vienna, which is just based on Vienna, which I've been to once in my life a while ago, 4 or 5 years ago, and yeah, it's just a good place to search for inspiration, any urban city environment, because you can observe people's body language. People's body language is subtle. I often find that when I'm in this marina now, for example, and I can basically intuitively just gather or just immediately know the different. Often, it's like sort of prejudgment, but you can sort of tell immediately from body language what sort of relationships people have with each other just by reading subtle body language cues. Now I'm not going to do this here because these are just a bunch of strangers that I don't know that well, but essentially I can just sort of just look at a person for, I don't know, a split second and sort of make certain assumptions about who they are, who they like. Basically, it's a bit of a superpower in some respects, but it's also a bit annoying, to be honest, because people don't like being read that way, essentially. Anyway, so like, obviously real personalities and characters in any game you make, obviously you have to design and create characters, especially if you're writing interactive fiction. You have to observe personalities and characters around you. I've used like the I mean, you can approach it through many psychological systems, like every Jungian, Freud, whatever. Like, but it doesn't really make a difference as long as you're actually distilling the essence of any character that you're creating. And any character you create anyway is going to be a mixture of several different people you might know in real life. It doesn't actually mean that there's the like it's literally a representation of them. It's more that it's an amalgamation of several different archetypes and characters, people, sorry, in real life. As I said, like I'm a method game designer, so essentially, yeah, of course I'm going to be certain characters are going to be influenced by people I know. Of course, it occurs on a subconscious level. You can't really control it. It's something you really have any power over, your subconscious, because your subconscious by definition is subconscious, so it's not actually in conscious awareness, if that makes sense, which you probably will to about 1% of you, unfortunately. Which might, I don't know, maybe that sounds a bit arrogant, but that's what it is. Already talked to you how our story is sort of implement this method design process or development process. Obviously, if you're doing programming, it's a different frame of, it's a different experience, it's a different way of creativity, different form of creativity, more Polian, I suppose, if you want to put it in sort of ancient Greek terms. So it's more left-brain, lateral thinking. It's often the more difficult part of making any game. Also, tool building as well. You have to sort of get into touch with that, like just do research. Going back to the method. It's not like I literally become characters in my game. Often there are self-inserts that happen obviously in the game. Like the last game I made, the Noir Nights game, a mobile game which you can download on Android and play on the web even for free. That is essentially the self-insert is actually the vampire figure who runs the gallery, so it's sort of like exploring my shadow side, because obviously in real life I'm not a vampire who runs a gallery in some weird like sort of cyberpunk city. Essentially, it's not me. It's not me. It's probably an aspect. It's probably my id in some way, I guess. I'm not avoiding really that much. It's the shadow side of it. Essentially I don't have to explain that too much. Basically, my shadow side is capricious, self-serving, narcissistic, violent, and a vampire. With all that covered, that's one of the ways that developing games, designing games can be quite useful, because it helps you explore parts of your own personality which might be either underdeveloped or not necessarily undeveloped, actually more like unexpressed, because in terms of one's own personality, everybody has a shadow side, everybody has a the shadow is just anything that is the opposite of you, basically, in Jungian terms. So for me, like I'm a computer scientist, I'm quite lateral, analytical, but also creative, do painting. So I have both aspects of the lateral analytical mind and creative Dionysian. So it's almost like like a lot of polymaths will experience this, basically, that they never really feel fully satisfied or at peace. It's just an artistic thing, really. Most artists are that way. I know a lot of artists, I live in London, I know many artists in London. I've been part of a collective for a long time, and we're never really satisfied ever fully with anything that we actually make, because we're creative, and by definition creativity is irrational. Okay, all that covered, I'll just do a landscape scan of this marina and just the scenery. With all that said, I'm going to go work on the game again. The game, City of the Damned, should be... I've not fallen too far behind. I've been working on it like a few hours for last week. I really need to just buckle down and solidify some certain aspects of the story. Some of the branching is going off into like the mechanics are probably a little bit too complex, so I need to actually simplify some aspects of them. Of course I want morality to be a big part of this game that I'm developing, so actually just being around, like having experience. I am certainly a developer who draws from, like I said, like experience, and actually, you know, it doesn't mean something crazy like, you know, like I wrote not long ago like a story about a serial killer. It doesn't mean I'm actually going to become a serial killer. It's actually exploring that darkest aspect of the human psychology that can, well, it's not even human, whatever, it's psychopathic. Psychopathy is being a psychopath, which obviously is not good. Like, so there's actually, I was reading recently about there is a certain kind of human being who will literally, the primary function of their psychology is to root out narcissists, psychopaths, and sociopaths, and remove them from the social body, basically. And I found that sort of an interesting thing. I think in some respects I do that creatively, like I just express it creatively. So if I ever encounter someone who you get that initial sort of, you get that sort of intuitive, I guess, understanding that this is a narcissist or a psychopath on some level. Now, with psychopaths, they can be functional psychopaths, so you know, but most of the time psychopaths are violent, basically, just mindlessly violent. Sociopaths tend to use people more. They tend to be active social manipulators. When in a certain way, it's often more tied in with high intelligence as well, which is quite scary. Anyway, yeah, like if you know, it's not a particularly good thing to socially engineer people, really. Like this does come into there's actually a lot of social engineering that occurs in hacker circles and things. I understand bare rudiments of this, basically, but that is something that a lot of the cybersecurity professionals will basically social engineer organisations to figure out flaws in their security systems. Anyway, a bit of a ramble, obviously, because I'm just freestyling off the top of my head. But yeah, like essentially I'm just describing the creative process. So if I'm going to create a game, I have to get into the head's space or the psychology as much as possible of a character or set of characters that I'm working on, which can involve watching a lot of films. A lot of old films is usually good. Obviously I've been watching a bit more noir recently, cyberpunk films, Blade Runner 2049, etc. Blade Runner, original Blade Runner, maybe something even old school, like Third Man. I need to watch that a bit, that again maybe. But also it just comes from the subconscious, right? So I don't just write from, you know, like if I just spend all the time just watching narratives that have already existed, then you're not going to have an original thought. So if you're going to create an original narrative, then you have to actually synthesis, basically. So you have to create, draw on existing information and create something new out of it, which is literally, essentially the definition of genius in most understandings of that word is getting two existing sets of data, like a Venn diagram, and basically combining them together to create something new, essentially. Anyway, that's sort of some insight into my creative game design process. This is the Alien Rabbit channel. Subscribe and like if you're interested in game design, narrative design, interactive fiction design, story writing, creative writing, or you just generally like have a curious mind about being creative, the power of storytelling, etc., etc. Anyway, all that said, Chris, have a good one. That's it, really. Like and subscribe if you like it. Be authentic, blah 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 blah.